You know, Nvidia has built this financial empire of an almost unimaginable size. But what if, and this is the big idea we're going to unpack here, what if that whole empire is way more fragile than anyone realizes?
$5 trillion. Just let that number sink in for a second. I mean, that's a valuation that puts Nvidia in a league of its own, right? It's a figure so massive, it feels more like science fiction than something you'd see on a stock ticker.
Yeah, a number like that, it doesn't just scream success. It implies this level of dominance that feels, well, absolute, almost permanent.
But what if it's not? What if the very foundation of this absolute giant is, well, built on sand? And what if it's about to crumble? That's the provocative idea we're really going to dig into today. Okay, so to even begin to understand this potential fragility, we first have to get our heads around the source of its strength, right? How on earth did Nvidia build this $5 trillion moat around its business? So here's the thing, and this is what's so fascinating about this whole story. The secret to their power isn't just about making the fastest chips. I mean, if it were just a hardware race, you've got to believe competitors would have caught up by now. No, the real power, the real secret sauce, is in the software. And that software has a name, CUDA. Now, the best way to think about CUDA is like a walled garden. Nvidia basically created this software world that's so powerful and so exclusive that once developers are in, it's just incredibly difficult for them to leave and use anyone else's hardware. They're locked in. And you gotta understand, this wasn't some happy accident. Oh no, this was a brilliant, calculated, decade-long strategy. First, they were smart. They gave CUDA away for free to universities, getting the next generation of researchers completely hooked on it. Then they made sure that the whole AI software stack, the big names like PyTorch and TensorFlow, ran best on their platform. And what's the result of all that? It's a classic lock-in. They've created a scenario where it's literally more painful and more expensive to switch than to just keep paying Nvidia, no matter what price they set. But here's the thing about walls, right? Even the highest, thickest walls can start to develop cracks. And that seemingly impenetrable fortress that Nvidia built, well, it's now starting to show some very real signs of weakness.
And the really interesting part is where these first warnings are coming from. They're not coming from some small, scrappy competitor. No, they're coming from the very top. We're talking about the hyperscalers, the tech giants like Microsoft who run these massive data centers. Nvidia's most important customers. And wow, this quote from Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella just says everything. He's talking about Nvidia's latest and greatest chips, the Blackwell architecture. And he's saying they're so power hungry and they run so incredibly hot that their existing data centers literally can't support them. I mean, think about that. When your single biggest customer tells you your brand new flagship product is pretty much unusable, you have a serious problem on your hands.
So this is the crucial point right here. The whole equation is starting to flip. For years, the fear of leaving CUDA was just too great. The switching cost was too high. But now, with hardware you can't even plug in, with these insane prices, with constant delivery delays, the pain of staying is becoming unbearable. So is it really a surprise that we're hearing reports that Microsoft has started cutting its Blackwell orders? Not at all. They say every prison has a key. And in this story, the key to breaking this CUDA prison, well, it might just be held by a tiny, virtually unknown company that is maybe, just maybe, poised to change everything. Okay, so get this. The company's name is Spectral Compute. It's a small British startup, and they've developed this incredible piece of technology called Scale. The best way to think of it is like a universal translator for code. It's a compiler that could, and this is not an exaggeration, fundamentally change the entire AI hardware market. And this slide just lays it out so perfectly. Look at the difference. The old way to escape CUDA meant this painful, super expensive process of rewriting or porting all your code just to get it to work on different hardware. And even then, you'd often take a big performance hit. But the Spectral way, you take your existing CUDA code, you don't change a thing, you just run it through their translator and boom, it works perfectly on competing hardware, like chips from AMD. It's a revolutionary idea. Now, to be clear, Spectral isn't the only one trying to knock this wall down. You've got Microsoft, you've got AMD, you've got open source projects. They're all working on their own solutions. But Spectral's key advantage, their real edge, is how seamless it all is. I mean, if they can really make this transition totally invisible to the developer, my God, the floodgates could open literally overnight. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This whole scenario, a seemingly untouchable tech giant getting brought down by some new paradigm shift, it sounds a little far-fetched, maybe even impossible. But here's the thing. We've seen this movie before.
Let's rewind to the 1980s. IBM was, for all intents and purposes, the Nvidia of its day. They absolutely dominated the mainframe market with a very similar software and hardware lock-in. And the company culture? It was one of pure arrogance. They genuinely believed their customers were captives, that they had nowhere else to go. And just look at how quickly it all unraveled. For years, IBM's dominance seemed unshakable. But as soon as a real, viable alternative, in this case, client-server computing, showed up, the customer exodus wasn't just fast, it was violent. Companies fled, and they were angry after years and years of being taken for granted. And the parallel here is, well, it's pretty chilling. That same level of resentment that built up against IBM, it's now building against Nvidia among the very same big tech companies that are its lifeblood. You know what they say, history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme.
Okay, so let's play this out. Let's just imagine for a second, what happens if this key actually works? What's the potential fallout if a company like Spectra, or a similar technology, truly breaks the CUDA moat for good?
Well, first off, the financial impact would be absolutely staggering. A $5 trillion valuation, that number assumes decades of monopoly profits. The second Nvidia becomes just another hardware vendor in a competitive market, its stock could absolutely crater. We're talking a potential wipeout of 50, 60, maybe even 70% of its value.
And then there's the human cost, which you can't forget. You have thousands upon thousands of Nvidia employees who are, right now, paper millionaires, just waiting for their stock options to vest. A market correction of this size would turn those life-changing lottery tickets into worthless confetti. It would absolutely destroy morale inside the company.
And the shockwaves wouldn't stop there. They'd ripple through the entire tech sector. The AI bubble, which has been so inflated by Nvidia's dominance, could burst. It could trigger a death spiral for the company itself, as falling stock leads to a massive brain drain of talent. But, and this is the silver lining, on the other side of all that chaos, it would mean the return of real, actual competition to the AI hardware industry. All of which leaves us with one final and, I think, just fascinating question. In an industry that's completely defined by massive data centers and unbelievably complex silicon, could the most powerful force for change, the thing that topples a $5 trillion giant, turn out to be something as small and as elegant as a single piece of code?